I'm about a mile away from my home in Welshpool. I'm halfway up the hill next to a Welsh holy place. There's a circle of yew trees which surrounds a black pool, and it's quite amazing. There's a little lodge cottage next to it called Middle Lodge, and it was there that I met a lady called Lucy who lived there for a while. She came from Mexico and she told me the most amazing Aztec story of a goddess called Coyolxauhqui. Apparently that means Lady of the Silver Bells. It's a very strange story. Coyolxauhqui was part of a very big family. She had 400 brothers. She was the only sister. Well, that was one massive family, and her mother, you won't be surprised to hear, was the goddess of fertility and plenty, Coyolxauhqui. The story starts with Coyolxauhqui, actually. Coyolxauhqui was in a temple, a funny building with a hole in the roof. It probably was a smoke hole, I should imagine, to send the messages up to the gods above. She was walking backwards and forwards when suddenly a gust of wind came through that smoke hole and blew a bundle of feathers from the rafters. And that bundle of feathers just swayed in the wind as it fell. And it glanced off Coyolxauhqui's shoulder. And that was it. Coyolxauhqui was pregnant. I bet you didn't know that could happen, but she was pregnant. And being a goddess of fertility, when I mean pregnant, I mean pregnant. Her tummy was growing as fast as you can imagine. It was making the strangest of noises. It was going... And there was no doubt about it, she was going to give birth any moment. Well, there's only one thing that was travelling faster than her stomach, and that was the story of her being pregnant again. It got to the ears of those 400 brothers and, of course, Coyolxauhqui, and they weren't happy. Being part of a big family has its stresses and strains, and one more sibling just will not do. They meant to remonstrate with their mother. And when a lady wants to remonstrate with someone, what does she do? She goes and puts on all of her finery. Coyolxauhqui put on all of her silver bells, draped around her head, all over her body. And then she went off to see her mum. Meanwhile, the boys... well, they did what boys do in these circumstances when they wish to remonstrate, to argue with someone. They got armed to the teeth, and off they set to impress their mother with the strength of their views. They flung open the door and rushed in to talk to their mother, and at that very moment, Mum's tummy had got so big that it popped, and out came Coyolxauhqui. And now Coyolxauhqui was clad in golden armour and armed to the teeth with every unimaginable weapon you can think of. After all, he was going to become the god of war, so that was, well, what you'd expect, really. He saw those brothers descending upon him with all of their weapons, and he didn't think twice. His arms started spinning like bacon slicers, and he went straight for them and turned them into mincemeat. And he scooped up the mincemeat in his tiny little baby fingers, and he threw it up through the temple roof, through that smoke hole into the sky, and they glistened like, well, like stars. Next, he turned his eyes on Coyolxauhqui with all her bells jingling and jangling. A fascinating sight, but she meant no good and he knew it. And he grabbed hold of her and he ripped her into 11 pieces and threw her to the ground. And then he turned and looked into his mother's eyes for the first time. And Coyolxauhqui was so sad that there was a tear running down her face and plopping off her chin to the floor. Well, Coyolxauhqui was not happy. He wanted to make his mum happy, and he thought she would be. He wanted to turn that frown upside down. So he quickly picked up the pieces of Coyolxauhqui and put them all together. Now, he had no real knowledge of anatomy at all, so he put them into a great big disc, and some unexplained urge made him pick that disc up and throw it like a frisbee out through the hole in the roof and up into the sky. And it stopped in the sky, silvery, sending down its light below. Coyolxauhqui looked up And she smiled, a great big beaming smile, to see her daughter up in the sky. And Huitzilopochtli was absolutely transformed with happiness. He started to run on his little golden legs. Round and round and round he ran until his feet left the ground. He levitated up into the air. He ran and he ran higher and higher through that smoke hole in the roof. And he ran with outstretched arms towards Coyolxauhqui. She saw him coming. She knew what he'd done last time, and she wasn't going to wait to see him. She started rolling, because that was the only way she seemed to be able to move, rolling through the sky with him pursuing with outstretched arms. And that is the story of how the stars came to be in the sky, how the moon travels across the sky with the sun following it. That's the brothers Coyolxauhqui and Huitzilopochtli, the sun.